Gold thwarts Western influence, potential upside breakout. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Insights brought to you by Ainslie Bullion and the Gold and Silver Standard. Today, we welcome back Sam, who's been away for the last couple of weeks, but he's come back in at a very exciting time in the markets where, in Aussie dollar terms, we're back up to that 3,000 level. Gold's looking very bullish. It's all pretty exciting. So a good time to come back. How are you going, Sam?
Yeah, good. Good to be back.
Back in the hot seat here.
Yeah, back in the hot seat.
you wrote a great article this morning, really back to our core focus on gold and highlighting this fact that we're up near those highs, but also you had some really interesting analysis in there talking about an analyst that you were looking at who had been tracking gold's connection to tips. So tips is something that a lot of people follow, but a lot of the rest of us probably don't really know what that is. So can you start off maybe by just explaining to us what tips are and how they're relevant here today?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'd like to give credit to Jan Nieuwenhuis, who's put together a lot of these details and made it quite easy to compare. But it's Treasury inflation protected securities. So essentially, it's a way to buy a bond that's supposed to protect against inflation. They're usually not very high performing investments. They're very defensive investments. But it looks like, according to this analyst, that across the last 16 years, the gold and the tips yield correlation has been really, really tight. But in 2023, the tips have fallen off and gold's just charged upward again. So gold's almost completely ignoring the tips yields. And that's probably due to falling inflation and rising interest rates environment that we've been in.
Yeah, okay. And that probably makes a bit of sense, really, that people in that environment still want gold, but don't necessarily want that additional protection. What if we think about central banks? Because I know a lot of the discussion has been around who's buying the gold to keep the prices up where they are at the moment against that environment that you've highlighted, where perhaps inflation's starting to fall a little bit, so some of those traditional drivers aren't necessarily there. If gold, central banks are buying up that gold, are they the only players here, or are there other institutions involved? What's your sort of view on who's actually buying here?
Well, firstly, it is kind of funny that tips, these government things that are supposed to protect you against inflation aren't being bought. Central banks aren't buying them.
Yeah.
So they're going straight for gold. So why have the middleman, let the government protect you against their own inflation? It doesn't really make sense. But the main suppliers, according to this report, of gold that's above ground are the UK and Switzerland, and they've been selling. So their strategy has been just follow what the tips are doing, and it looks like they're following it the wrong way because they've been selling gold. Whereas on the other hand, China is going along with the central banks, and they're buying up as much gold as they can. So the Western institutions, essentially, via Switzerland and the UK, have been the big sellers.
Right, and there's a really great meme at the bottom of the news today where one side throwing dollars over the wall and the other side throwing bricks of gold back. It is a classic meme, isn't it?
Yeah, the West throwing away bricks of gold in exchange for paper,
Yep.
to try to keep it going. So that's almost exactly what's happening.
Yeah. Okay. So another angle that I've been looking at, and I know you've been looking at it as well, is this idea we have this classic tool that if we want to predict the price of gold, we look at the dollar, or specifically the dollar index, the DXY. But at the moment, that seems to be falling. Like it has been in a downtrend, and it has had recently a bit of strength. But it seems in the last couple of days that maybe that has topped, and maybe it's topped a little bit lower than the previous high. So are we in a downtrend there? That seems to be falling. How are you reading the relationship with the dollar here?
Well, it's interesting that people refer to it as the dollar, because it's not the dollar, it's the US dollar currency index. Now, if you break down the US dollar currency index, what is it? It's measuring how much people want US dollars. No, it's about 60% of its weight is just the euro.
Yep.
So you may as well just look at Euro USD. The next is the Japanese yen. So the Japanese yen's about 14% of the weight. Now, what's Japan been doing? Have they had really responsible policies over there, or are they essentially trying to
No one
scratch
ever
their way
accuses
back
them
up?
of that.
Yes. So that's, I mean, it's the DXY, it's US dollar currency index in situations where, you know, Japan's scrambling, Europe's scrambling, the US is scrambling, comparing currencies against each other. There's not too much point.
Yep. And that is, and you make that point every single time, and I fall for that trap every single time, that the US dollar, you really can't look at it just with that index, because it is comparing, you've got to compare it to what? So when you talk about a US dollar pair, it's the other side that's relevant. I mean, you look at the Australian dollar recently relative to the US dollar, even with that index, it's not necessarily being performing one to one. And that probably has a lot to do with our background here as well. You know, that commodity producer. There's a lot of reasons that I think to be bullish the Aussie dollar, that could potentially break away from that pattern generally of what's happening with the US dollar. Do you sort of see it that way with the Aussie?
Well, yeah, we're stuck. We're stuck though underneath, you know, because we just give raw supplies to China, and then China makes it and sells it
Yeah.
to the rest of the world. So if the rest of the world wants to be able to afford it, if China wants to be able to afford it, we need to kind of kick ourselves in the pants and make our currency low so that we can actually sell more.
Yeah, a very good point. There's a lot of politics that goes on behind that as well. So I suppose to wrap it up today, I'd really love to know your perspective around gold's technical pattern here, because from my perspective, it's looking pretty good. I was talking with Alex about this on Tuesday, just how against the background of all this macro stuff that's going on, gold has had the potential to fall and hasn't. It's really sort of feels like it's made a higher base. I can see potential for it to really break out. Is that how you're viewing it here?
Yeah, it surprised me. I thought it was going to retrace down a little bit with the S&P 500, with all the, you know, Nvidia and all the overly hyped market news that's been coming out. I thought it would retrace a little bit, but it just kept shooting back up. And if you look at the big picture, if you look at, you know, what people are calling a triple top, or you know, this sort of pattern, I mean, the only reason a double top is a sign of something going lower is there's, you know, you run out of buyers. It failed at a resistance twice, but now it's attempting the same it's attempting the same line the third time, you know, gold against US dollar. And when that happens, when something persistently tightens up against a resistance line, from a technical point of view, that's an incoming break. That's an incoming breakout. So
I did see a commentary on Twitter that said there's no such thing as a triple top, using that as a very bullish, really saying what you're saying there, that, yeah, if it's had those couple of goes and then it comes back up again, well, it's not staying there this time. It really wants to take it out. And that's really what you're saying with that technical pattern, isn't it? That if, yeah, that third time's a charm sort of mentality.
well, sometimes the third time can be the break, or other times it just consolidates and keeps getting higher lows along that resistance
Yeah.
line until it breaks out. Obviously, not every time, anything can happen, but it's a very textbook technical pattern playing out there on gold.
Well, I'm going to stick with my mantra that there's no such thing as a triple top, and and hold my breath, because I'm confident. I'm feeling very excited about the potential for this breakout, and I think we've waited a long time, so I think it'll start to see the markets really pick up. Should be exciting days ahead.
Sounds good.
Well, thanks for that today, Sam. It's always great to get your opinion on where we are in the markets, and we'll be looking forward to seeing where we end up, you know, next week, and if we have sort of touched that line again, or broken through.
All right, sounds good, Chris.
Thanks everyone for watching. Remember, reach out with any questions or comments on the social platforms. It's been great to get that feedback on there, and we do take that on board. That's us for today. That's us for this week as well, actually. We'll be back on Tuesday with Alex to discuss all things markets and metals. Until then, have a great rest of the week and weekend, everyone.